believe we have a quorum. Is that correct?
Arlene, you're
Muted.
Yes, Chair Potter, you have a quorum. You have the committee, all committee members are in attendance.
I will go ahead and move public comments and opportunity for any public to speak on items not on today's legislative agenda. For anybody wishing to do so, somebody needs to mute their phone. Arlene, I'm going to assume there's nobody wishing to speak.
I'm going to check this. I see no raised hands.
All righty, and that'll bring us to our first action item, which is the approval of the minutes of. Were there any committee members with objections to their accuracy, desired for corrections?
No, I move approval of the minutes.
You have a motion by Edwards, seconded by Byrne. Any other discussion? Anybody in the public with a concern with this item? All righty, then we will go ahead and call a roll call.
All right. Director Edwards,
Approval?
Director Byrne,
Yes.
and Director Potter.
Aye. Unlike you now.
Unanimous approval.
All righty, let's move on to the discussion items. JEA Associates, alleged status and bill tracking update. Lori, are you doing this or is John there? Or Dave?
Is that John?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Not, so
Let's see. Lori,
Pardon?
excuse me. Excuse me, Lori, is John on the call?
He was trying to get on right now. He was texting me,
Okay.
but
I'm
can
going to-
go ahead and take this.
Good.
Okay, actually, he says he's on. So, John, do you want to start? Is he muted, Arlene?
I see a caller. Please identify yourself. This may be John.
Yeah, this is John Arriaga.
All right, I've unmuted you, John. I'm going to just leave you unmuted.
Okay, thank you. Well, again, I'll just start us off, and then Lori will get into the details of this. But we have just concluded a legislative session unlike any of us have ever experienced in our lifetime, and hopefully we'll not have to do this again because it was most unusual and difficult to get through the session. You know, the legislature, I think as we spoke last time, they were moving along January, February, and then come March, early part of March, they just shut it down. And it was shut down for at least a good month. They came back for about a week or two, shut it down again, and really didn't get started into the work of things until late July, at which time they stayed pretty much in session through the end of August. And with that said, there were a good number of bills that were just put to the wayside. They focused on obviously the COVID-19 type of legislation. But during that interim, we also had the whole civil unrest with the Black Lives Matter issues and so forth through June and July. So that also created dozens of bills that were introduced. And so it was quite a busy year. We're still kind of getting through it. They've adjourned now. But Lori's going to get into some of the specific issues that they dealt with over that short period of time. So Lori, you want to go ahead and take it from here?
Sure. So yeah, as John said, there were a lot of breaks and a lot of disagreements between both houses. But a common goal of getting some of the big issue items out. I'm sure you heard about the COVID eviction release. So basically this, which the governor signed prior to the Judicial Council's moratorium, it's ending, and essentially it creates a tier, and come February 1st, 2021, evictions for non-payment, even related to COVID, can start to begin. So, you know, as far as this with MPWMD, if you have water services and changeovers and whatnot, to say what the region is, how it's going to be impacted, we are unsure of the number of people being displaced, and also with that of where these people are going to be going. On the business side, they did at the end a small business tax credit. The state ponied up about $100 million for small businesses. For those that hire qualified employees, it would be a $1,000 tax credit with a maximum of $100,000. This is going to, you know, small businesses were pushing for this as well as labor. One of the victims of the end of session hours was the big housing bill by Pro Tem Atkins, which is 1120. Assemblymember Rivas was the floor jockey on this and working this very hard. And essentially it would allow duplexes to be allowed in single family home subdivisions. And they were talking about this being an increase of about 600,000 housing units per year. Do expect this bill to come around come January when they reconvene. As John said, as a result of the protests and Black Lives Matter and George Floyd, there was about 24 police reform bills that were put forth. The big ones that were of concern did fall by the wayside due to, again, end of session chaos, as well as lobbying from the police chiefs and the unions on this one, but expect these bills to be back as well. And then we have some farm worker relief. As you probably already know, that the governor's been touting his Project Room Key, which is now Home Key, that's funding for local jurisdictions to acquire and purchase hotels and shelters for more of a permanent supportive housing for the homeless throughout the state. With the leadership of Assemblymember Rivas, he was able to open those rooms to farm workers for quarantine and isolation due to COVID. We're still waiting for those funds to come through the Central Coast. Right now, it's predominantly in the Central Valley because of the high numbers of cases in those 8 counties and the governor's strike team that they're really trying to focus on that. But moving into the water bond and infrastructure stimulus, this is something that the district has been incredibly supportive of. When the governor came out pre-COVID, it seems so long ago, it was going to be about a $4.7 billion climate resiliency water bond. And through those months, we worked and advocated constantly with Aqua and their working group of what this was going to look like in the pots of fund and going back with the administration. So post-COVID, they wanted to scale it down. There was still a lot of bipartisan, bicameral support for some type of economic stimulus pertaining to infrastructure and also dealing with climate resiliency. So trying to wrap all these issues. So they did one, they tried to scale it back to a $2.5 billion, and they weren't even going to go for a bond. They just wanted it straight out of the general fund and some of the cap and trade dollars. That fell by the wayside. And in mid-July, I'm sure you heard, led by Senator Hertzberg, was going to pull up this $100 billion economic stimulus, all these projects, get California working again. And this was going to be basically a lot of tax shifting on the state's part, as well as some borrowing. Both measures under the weight of just the legislative session and post-July tax receipts coming in, they just couldn't make the cut. We are hearing from stakeholders from the environmental groups to the water and land stakeholders that they are going to be pushing hard on this come January, and they're trying to get the governor to put something in his January budget proposal to, again, further get the state's economy moving, while at the same time addressing some of the climate issues that he has been hammering during these wildfire seasons and these critical water projects that need to be funded. So we're going to be working on that over the next couple months, and the working groups are going to come together. And I think with MPWMD, depending on what is going to be going on with the desal and whatnot, we're going to see where we're going to want to put and advocate our efforts in these funds that are going to start being created. So we'll be working with you closely on that.
Hey, Lori, this is Dave. Yeah. A couple questions. Calendar-wise or timing-wise, if they were to bring back another water bond proposal, when would be the election? 2 years away?
Yes, on just a practical level, but people are foreseeing a special election sometime next year.
Okay.
On a couple efforts, and they don't want to wait. And when we say the word bond, what they could be doing is, borrowing from Peter to pay Paul.
Yeah.
To get it out sooner than later.
Yeah, in addition to that, I mean, I think this legislature and the governor are really willing to move forward with some type of infrastructure bond of some sort to get the economy going again. Unfortunately, like as you indicated, they weren't able to do it this year, but I'm sure that's going to be at the top of the level of things coming in January that they will be working on through the first part and trying to get that expedited.
And John, second question, timing wise, we're at the end of the 2-year session, right? So everything starts fresh next year.
Everything will start fresh. Yeah, they'll reconvene or convene the new 21-22 session in December, and then start the bill introduction at that time and get rolling again in January.
Okay, thank you.
So yes, just to agree with John, this is definitely coming back, and this is probably going to be an urgency item to get these funds out there sooner than later. Both the legislature and the administration know that they cannot wait for 2022 to put something significant on the ballot, that they're going to need to come up with some creative solution. So look for the Hertzberg proposal, some bits and pieces of that. But we're hearing a lot of that from not only from local governments, but different water agencies and IOUs and et cetera, that they're ready to start working on this. So with legislation, you have your bill track in front of you. All the gray bills are bills that never made it to the governor's desk. It was an insurmountable amount. When they did come back after their recess and the Assembly and the Senate finally got aligned on their own schedules, there was a big push not to hear a lot of bills and to tell authors and to shelve a lot of their issues. So if they did not do it, Appropriations Committee did it for them. So of the bills that the district took position on, believe it or not, 2 of them did make it to the governor's desk, but we'll go through them. And the first being 1958 by Assemblymember Cooper. And we were supportive of this in the beginning as a way that there would be some more enforcement and authority by local jurisdictions to for the protection and to go after people who deface and destroy or cutting or altering the levees, as well as all the waterways. We've been dealing with this in the Sacramento area, where the homeless encampments are cutting into our levees for a more flat and stable ground. And it's been proliferated throughout the state. Unfortunately, as good as this bill was, and it needed to be applied statewide, I think from pressure from leadership, that he made this only apply to the Sacramento and San Joaquin Delta region. So this is not applicable to MPWMD at this point, but we were very supportive of what he was trying to do. And we'll hopefully look for him to do something like this statewide when we come to more pleasant legislative waters. The second is AB Quirk, or AB 2560, by Assemblymember Quirk, and this requires the State Water Resources Control Board to post on its internet site and distribute through electronic mail that is initiated the development for a notification level or response level for a contaminant, and draft the NL or RL along with supporting documentation. So this is more of a transparency and disclosure, which we were supportive of. The next bill by Assemblymember Rivas, AB 2954, this basically would require the ARB with setting an overall climate goal for the state's natural working lands, which in part would support our efforts to achieve carbon neutrality and climate resilience. And unfortunately, this was held in Senate appropriations. The other bill that we were supportive of, and again, with all of these, when these did come to before committees that we were testifying on behalf of the district, is 3005, and this expedites the permitting and contracting requirements in order to facilitate the replacement of the Anderson Dam and Reservoir. As you know, that this is they're going to be having to drain this come the end of next month, and they're trying to head this off at the pass. And then lastly, and this is, and I apologize for the typo, it is SB 1099 by Senator Dodd. And this essentially required air districts to develop stipulations for an order of abatement that would allow permitted facilities to use backup generators in exceedance of the hours should they enter in a stipulated order of abatement from the local air district. So buying them a little bit more flexibility and wiggle room during these times. And again, that was held in Assembly Appropriations. But again, two of the bills that we were supportive of are on the governor's desk awaiting action. And he has until the end of this month to veto or sign any legislation before him. Are there any questions?
Any questions by committee members, Laurie or John?
None for me.
Okay, and then the last ones are the Sacramento meetings that we're going to be having on our the Condition 2 issue that was discussed last legislative committee. And we are ready to set meetings with both chief consultants from the Senate Housing Committee and the Assembly Housing and Community Development Committee. They are very, very knowledgeable and have been extremely helpful to the district in the past in kind of working through these issues. And we kind of want to get a feel from them as well as staff in Senator Skinner's office, who authored SB 330, who's kind of putting us in this pickle before we start going to the housing and community development. There's a lot of right now, because of all the housing legislation in the previous years, a tremendous amount of turnover and building up of that department. And we kind of want to get a little bit of bearings and our footing before we start walking in there for solutions and answers. So we should be setting up those meetings hopefully within the next week now that session has ended, and again do those virtually and report back to the legislative committee of any updates that we or the general manager may have.
All righty. Any questions regarding that proposal? Makes sense. And these would all be virtual.
Yeah, and we intend to open them up to have a representative from the City of Monterey Planning Department with us.
All right. You know, I think from the League of California City standpoint, I am on the board of directors for the League. There's a concern about the lack of local control of housing legislation that's out there. I frankly have a problem with it violating local zoning ordinances. It's kind of like throwing because of the fact that you all of a sudden be in a residential single-family neighborhood, and all of a sudden you're in a multiplex neighborhood where you've got duplexes and triplexes going in your backyard. When the neighborhood was designed only to accommodate single-family residential, you end up with other adverse impact: parking, lack of community character, density issues, volume issues. So it's not a very popular move. It's not that we don't understand that we have arena numbers that we have to yes, we get that. But the fact of the matter is, people didn't buy a residential neighborhood to go ahead in a multi-zone neighborhood.
Yeah.
So I would like to echo that same concern. We're dealing with ADUs on the Planning Commission and PG. And there's issues with creating overdense neighborhoods. Parking is a huge issue. Essentially, we have the first issue in the beach tract R1 zone, which is essentially a 3-unit apartment building. There's no other way to describe it. So there's some pluses, but there's some very real minuses. So we do need to look at all that.
That I agree. Thank you. I also think that these properties need to be deed restricted for controlling, address the 40. Otherwise, they'll just go to market rate. In Carmel, our arena number is 36. I think we can provide that in the downtown area.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and from our standpoint, we've looked, so like every time an ADU legislation comes out, there's always a piece about utility hookup and waiver of connection charges and so forth. But as we've read them, when they waive the parking requirement and they waive other requirements, we knew that you guys at the cities were going to eventually weigh in and feel like you've lost local planning authority. And it's inevitable. But from the water standpoint, we're going to leave that for you to deal with. We're just trying to get, some pressure on the state board to free some water up, so that you can say no if you need to. But yeah, reading the legislation and then they go in and they amend the legislation, they amend it again. They're trying to take away all of your ability to control the look and feel of your neighborhood.
Exactly. It's the end of zoning as we know it.
Well, one of the concerns that we've discussed at sort of the planning level is the fact that the virus was more prevalent in high density areas. And what we're doing is creating high density areas. So you solve one problem and you create another.
Interesting. Yeah. All right. Action item. So is there any other direction you need, John or Laurie?
No, I don't think on our end. What I would like to say is to this committee and particularly to Dave and Dave, with the elections coming on there, likely to be our next senator for the area. He comes in with a tremendous, interest in the water area, particularly with his time as Secretary of Resources. And we saw when he was in the Assembly, the numerous bills that he introduced and actually got all the way through and signed by the governor then on water issues. So we really ought to give this some thought over the fall as to things we'd like Laird to work on, because he's going to come in as a force. He knows his way around very well, and I think he can be very helpful to this agency. So just give it some thought.
Yeah, and I've still got a $99 check for him for the fundraiser that was supposed to be at the Potter's house the 3rd week of March.
That's been put on hold. It's going to be a victory celebration.
Yeah.
All right, Ferguson's have at it.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, appreciate it. We appreciate the opportunity to be with you. Just to give you I'm going to give you a quick overview on the appropriations process and where that stands, and we're going to talk briefly about the where things stand in terms of infrastructure, and then talk about COVID-19 relief, and then talk briefly about the tracker that we've that's in your packet. Just in terms of generally the House and Senate are currently in session, as you're aware, and things are pretty focused at this point as you're reading in the papers and hearing on other media, on the effort to replace the Supreme Court Justice Ginsburg. And so that's, the efforts, which Stephanie Misser will talk a little bit more about where the COVID-19 relief effort is. And that has been somewhat derailed, it appears, because of this effort, the focus on a Supreme Court nominee. Right now, though, the focus is on the continuing, passing a stopgap funding measure, a continuing resolution to keep the government running through, through the end of this or into the new fiscal year. The current fiscal year ends on the 30th of September, and this will, they're getting ready to pass a bill that will extend the keep government operating at current levels, FY20 levels through the beginning of FY21 until December 11th. And so it's a short-term measure, just over 10 weeks. That'll keep government, operating past the election. We expect to vote on this today in the House, and the plan is to, even though there are still a few remaining outstanding issues, the plan is to get this to the White House, to the president to sign, and the expectation is that it will be for September 30th. A few things beyond just kind of keeping government operating that are included in the measure is something that you're familiar with, seeing extensions in the past. That's NFIP, the National Flood Insurance Program, being extended for the 16th time. So this is again the 16th short-term extension. That is being extended though through September 30th of 2021. Then there are a couple of other measures, the reclamation drought response authorization, and additional funding for disaster relief under FEMA programs that are also being extended. And then finally, the transportation reauthorization process, the FAST Act, the existing authorization for the transportation programs is being extended as well. And with that, I'll turn it over to Chris Kearney's going to give you a brief up where things stand on infrastructure and the Water Resources Development Act, your reclamation water programs. Chris.
Thanks, Roger, and good afternoon, everyone. Appreciate taking a few minutes. On infrastructure, as you know, it's kind of been the sort of a little bit like the football in Peanuts with Lucy and Charlie Brown. Every time we think we have something, that it gets moved, and we are in that situation once again. Both the Senate and House committees, Environment and Public Works and Transportation Infrastructure, have reported some version of infrastructure out of their committees, primarily with respect to focus on the Army Corps of Engineers reauthorization bill that moves every 2 years. The House has done theirs. The Senate has done theirs. The Senate has also moved their highway bill and their safe drinking water bill. So those are kind of the umbrella infrastructure bills. The House continues to focus on their highway bill, but frankly, it's lagging and far behind. The one the furthest along under that umbrella is the Corps of Engineers, the water bill. While it is clear that there will not be time before the election for there to be floor consideration of that bill in either the House or Senate, there are conversations and negotiations going on behind the scenes, kind of what they in DC refer to as pre-conferencing between the House and Senate. There is an ultimate goal to bring a piece of legislation that has been jointly agreed to the floor, probably of the House, passed there first and then sent to the Senate, although those particulars have not quite been worked out yet. And that is most certainly going to be in a lame duck session post-election. So we continue to monitor that closely. We understand those conversations are going along well. However, as you can imagine, the politics looming not only in the Supreme Court context, but also potential control of the Senate and expanding control of the House by the Democrats is also starting to have a color on that. It's also having an impact most directly on ongoing conversations we've reported to you on before with respect to provisions associated with reclamation, Bureau of Reclamation, what we've referred to as the reclamation package or reclamation title, which we expect still the water bill to be a vehicle for. The conversations between Senate Republicans and Democrats, and to a lesser extent House Republicans and Democrats, are continuing along those lines. Our understanding is that those conversations, despite the politics that are looming, are moving forward. There's a little bit of goalpost moving that's been brought in from some of the outside groups on the Democratic side here in the last few days, trying to push a little bit more of the provisions that would benefit Bureau of Reclamation operations such as WaterSmart grants programs, which is a part of the discussion. The continuation and expansion of that is part of the discussions. We're hearing some efforts to perhaps modify some of the scope of what the WaterSmart bill or grant programs might be with a bit more of an ecosystem restoration emphasis. So that has been injected into the conversations recently. Also, I think getting some traction of note for you all in addition is conversations underway that have started in the House, particularly by Congressman Garamendi, but also of interest in the Senate, provisions that would expand the WIFIA, would actually extend the repayment terms for WIFIA from roughly 35 years to 50 or 55 years, which primarily would have the benefit, if enacted, in being able to lower the rates that water users, customers of yours would benefit from. So there's a good deal of interest in that. A lot of conversation. Certainly, Roger is well steeped in it, can speak to the details of that if you have detailed questions. But there's real interest in that among a number of members from the House delegations in California, and that is an active conversation in the Senate. And then also, finally, in the water space, that is of active consideration in that scope of discussions is Senator Gardner and Feinstein's Bill S. 1932. Which focuses on surface storage and groundwater storage. That's also a subject of much discussion. So we continue to monitor that, keep an eye on it as the politics of it color it, move it back and forth. And but I think we feel fairly confident at this point that just as water has been the case before, at the end of the day, it remains bipartisan, and we'll see legislation across the finish line in lame duck, whatever that and whenever that takes shape post election.
Hey, Chris, I got a couple of WIFIA questions. So Mike McCullough has been working on extending our WIFIA application extension, for a year.
Yeah.
Because of the uncertainty surrounding desal and Pure Water Monterey. Interestingly, they want more information, and they still want us to pay the application fee by October 10th. So, we'll be looking into doing that, even though we don't know if the project will move forward. But, certainly we're going to look to extend. But also in the bill tracker, there's a Senate bill that would tie the interest rate for WIFIA loans to the U.S. Treasury rate of a similar maturity. And I guess I'm just trying to find out, is that a move in a better direction or a worse direction? I thought WIFIA was trying to compete with tax-exempt financing with rates that were kind of in between U.S. Treasuries and tax-exempts, but then better terms on the front end and delay of payment and so forth. Do you know anything about this? I guess it's a Jeff Merkley bill to tie it. It's in the bill tracker, S 4206.
Maybe I could talk about that. Dave, I think the purpose of that bill is to actually give more flexibility to borrowers to allow them to choose the interest rate that's in effect at the time when the loan is closed or when the first funds are dispersed, whichever is less. And so that's really the benefit of that proposal. So it is intended to address, give you more flexibility. You close on your loan. You actually, if that bill gets enacted, and we got a pretty good chance, we think, of being considered as part of this end of the year package that Chris was talking about. It's relatively non-controversial. It's certainly providing some real clear benefits. There are a lot of existing folks like yourselves who have actually even closed on their loans technically, but have not taken disbursements, that are interested in taking advantage of the lower rates. Today, WIFIA is 1.41%. Even 3 or 4 months ago, it was 2.8. So, I mean, there are benefits to all water users, certainly, to have that additional flexibility. And that's certainly a bill that we were bring to your attention. And it's just something, it's just getting attention. It'd be helpful to have the district weigh in on it. And
I understand now. Yeah, I think we did briefly talk about that on Monday.
That does raise one other point that Roger and I were talking about, and that is that to the extent to which you all see the value to that bill, but also in addition the WIFIA repayment extension bill as something you'd be interested in, I think it would be timely to consider a letter to the committees of jurisdiction in support of that.
So I don't think there's any objections from the committee to go ahead and do that. That sounds like a good idea.
Okay.
Great.
Great, go ahead.
Any right now by committee members? Chris, I don't see any. Good job.
Great.
Then we'll just ask Stephanie, you want to just give a quick update on the COVID-19, then we'll go to the tracker.
Yes, sure. So as you've probably heard in the news for the past few months, Congress and the White House have had a really difficult time trying to come to an agreement on a fifth coronavirus relief package. There have been a couple different proposals released just this month, but neither of them seem to be gaining much traction. One of them is originated with Senate Republicans, and they're calling it shorthandedly the skinny coronavirus relief package, and it's about $500 billion, and that's about half the size of a previous Republican proposal just in August. So the Senate Republicans have kind of cut down what they're willing to concede to, at least as of right now, to about $500 million. But the White House seems to be on a different page. They're willing to agree to a higher number. The president is especially, but even some of the main negotiators like Treasury Secretary Mnuchin is interested in a higher number. And one of the other proposals that has gotten a lot of attention, but again, not a lot of traction, has originated with the House Problem Solvers Caucus. And that bill is about $1.5 trillion. And that's a bipartisan effort. So that's what's really important about this proposal, is that it's bipartisan. But it's still quite a bit lower than what most Democratic leaders would like to see. They're still hovering at about a $2.2 trillion proposal is what they'd like to see. So some major House leaders, committee leaders have come out expressing that they have concerns with this $1.5 trillion package. But again, this is something that even the White House has said could serve as the basis for ongoing negotiations. But as of right now, we're not seeing any negotiations continue. But what is great about this bipartisan proposal that just came out last week is that it includes additional state and local aid, so about $500 billion. That state and local aid continues to be a pretty major sticking point with a lot of Republican leaders. So it continues to be an issue, but some in the White House have expressed potential interest in providing additional state and local aid, and that it's in this package is helpful to see, considering it's a bipartisan package. From your perspective, what we have not seen in these proposals is the inclusion of a provision that would allow this type of direct assistance to go directly to special districts. Right now, that is not allowed, but there's a bill in the House and the Senate that would allow any additional direct aid that would typically go to state and local governments would additionally go to special districts. This proposal that was released last week, it wasn't legislative language, it was a framework. So it was a kind of bullet pointed document, so not legislative language. So it's still possible that that type of provision could be included in the next coronavirus relief package. And I know that the sponsors and co-sponsors of those bills in the House and the Senate are going to continue to push to have that language put in the next coronavirus relief package, so you could be a recipient of direct aid. And Mr. Panetta is a co-sponsor of the House bill. And as you recall, the district sent a letter to Senators Feinstein and Harris about this special districts legislation, requesting their support in the Senate. And both senators are original co-sponsors of the Senate bill. So they will all continue to push to have that language included in the next relief package. But we will not see, most likely, a package before the November elections. So we'll probably see a package after the November elections, but not in the next few weeks because Congress will be going out of session prior to the November elections. They'll be out almost all the month of October. So it doesn't leave a lot of time to work on a package like this, especially when there's a significant amount of negotiation that needs to happen. So we're looking at past November, probably most likely December.
And for the benefit of the directors, Jimmy is a member of the Problem Solvers Caucus.
Yes.
The bipartisan group.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you, Stephanie. Is there any questions by committee members of Stephanie at this time?
Hey.
Stephanie, hey. Looks like you did a good job. Thank you.
And Roger, I think you had one thing you'd like to say. And you're on mute, Roger.
Yes, sorry about that. So the last part of the package, the last item is just the bill tracker, and that's in your package. And just want to highlight a couple of things. One is that I mean there are 4 bills that are new to the tracker from the last time you saw this, and one is sponsored by Mr. Panetta and Senator Feinstein's Emergency Wildfire and Public Safety Act of 2020. It's HR 7978 and S 4431, bringing some new resources and additional focus, streamlining of environmental reviews, that kind of thing for forest management. 2 other bills we've spoken about. One is the Mr. Garamendi's bill on the extending the repayment period for WIFIA loans. This third is the bill that we talked about with Mr. Merkley's bill on allowing more flexibility on the determination of what the interest rates could be would take effect for your WIFIA loan, and allow you borrowers more flexibility in setting that rate. And then the fourth one is Water Conservation and Farming Act, S 4189, is by Mr. Wyden of Oregon. It's a bill that, again, provides additional resources that the district would be of interest in for ecosystem restoration, for water smart, and just generally watershed restoration recovery efforts. And beyond that, so, we'd be happy, again, if there are any questions about any of the specific bills that are here. Again, we've suggested that, a couple of letters, the district consider, as you've already decided, to send a couple of letters on the WIFIA, 2 WIFIA-related pieces of legislation. But happy to answer any questions that you might have about any of these other bills that are listed.
Are there any questions, Roger? And Roger, we will, as we always have done, launch the letters accordingly at your recommendation. So much appreciated.
Yeah, my only question is there's 2 Harris bills, 2 Kamala Harris bills. Should we assume that if that ticket is elected, that those bills just die in their steps?
Yeah, I mean yes, the one. I mean, the exception is one of the bills in particular. Both bills actually deal with water-related matters, and pieces of those legislation of the 2 bills could be brought into the discussions on the broader infrastructure package. One, is focused on really environmental justice and drinking water availability, clean water for drinking water purposes. That bill, is certainly under consideration as part of the EPA sort of section of the water discussions, and the effort to the other bill by Senator Harris is actually focused on, at least in part, on Water Smart program and expanding that. And that's definitely, as Chris alluded to earlier, is an area that's getting a lot of attention and will be part of the negotiations in the lame duck. So those, will still get some attention, but certainly if nothing happens on them, they'll go by the wayside, and the bills will have to be picked up by others. Again, as you said, if the Biden Harris ticket is successful in November.
All righty. Any other questions or comments? All right. Thank you very much, Ferguson.
Absolutely. Just one last point. I'll leave you one last point. Just wanted to give you a little looking ahead to what's going on here. I mean, there is the House, the chairman of the House Appropriations Committee is stepping down at is retiring, and Representative Nita Lowey, and the three members that are vying for her position are active on the earmark issue. I just wanted to bring that up, that two of those three candidates are pushing for and are making a commitment to restore earmarks. So regardless of what happens in these other, the broader issues of Senate control and the White House, in all likelihood, the expectation is certainly that the House will continue to be in Democratic hands. And if it is, then the expectation is that we might see earmarks return. So just wanted to put
That'd
that
be
out.
refreshing. That'd be nice.
Right.
Dedicated money for specific causes. Wonderful. Love it.
Right.
It was development come back too at some point.
Right.
Guys, Dave, let's move on. Unless there's any other comments to General Manager's accounts on recent upcoming legislative actions.
Yeah, we can go very quickly. Just a series of letters. This one from last week, Lori already covered Quirk's AB 2560. This was just urging the governor to sign it. The next one is the Santa Clara Valley Anderson Dam in support of Robert Rivas, which we're supporting Rivas for a variety of reasons, not just the fact that the Anderson Dam is an important project. The floodwaters could reach Monterey. We think he's a heck of a legislator that we want to stay close to. Same with the next letter directly to Rivas. And then on the federal side, here's our letter for the Garamendi bill, 7073, that would allow special districts access to COVID monies. By the way, COVID-19, I've determined that's how many pounds you put on during the shelter in place. 19.
I lost 10 pounds.
Geez, I admire that. I really do. It's tough. The June letter to Atkins and Rendon are also the same kind of orientation to just remind special districts need attention. The final two letters were done by the Alliance for Water Efficiency, and we are just co-signatories along with about 100 other water agencies nationally. And we typically sign these in support of program changes. So that's the only activity. It'll probably be pretty thin for the next quarter because of the election and the lack of anybody being in session to consider any bills. But I feel good about what we've done here, and we'll work with Roger on letters of support for WIFIA and others, and anything that John and Lori asked for that may come back around, which is highly unlikely.
Well, we can always meet on an as-needed basis if something urgent came up, but I tend to agree with you, Dave. I don't think that's going to be happening right now when everybody's focused on the politics of the capital, both Sacramento and the U.S. So.
Yeah.
All righty. Unless there's anything else for the good of the order. Any other comments or questions by committee members? All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Thank you, Ferguson. Thank you, John. Lori, much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Have a good one.
You betcha.